You ever look around at your life and think, everyone thinks I'm okay? And that scares the hell out of me. Because on the outside, you've got the job, the relationship, the apartment with the fake plant in the corner and the matching throw pillows. And still, you feel like you're slowly dying in a room no one else can see. But when you say you're tired, they say, get some rest. When you say you're lost, they say, just be grateful. When you say you're not okay, they say, but you look so blessed. This video isn't for the people who want you quiet. It's for the version of you that's screaming into a pillow at 2 a.m. and still has to show up to work with a fucking smile. If that's you, don't scroll, because this is where the pretending stops.
Let's just get one thing straight from the jump. You're not crazy for feeling like you're falling apart when everyone else says you're doing great. You're not broken because you cry in the shower but post pictures with a smile. And no, you're not ungrateful because your life looks good on paper, but your body feels like it's been holding its breath for months. You're just tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that makes you want to disappear just long enough for the world to forget what they expect from you. If you're here, maybe it's because you've been performing strength for so long you forgot what softness feels like. Maybe you've been clapping for yourself with bloody hands. Maybe you've built a whole life around looking blessed, but behind the scenes, your soul is duct taped together. And no one fucking sees it. Because you look fine. You show up. You smile when people say, "You're such an inspiration." You nod and thank them like you didn't just spend 45 minutes convincing yourself to get out of bed this morning. Let me ask you something brutal. When was the last time someone asked how you're doing and actually meant it? Not the, "How are you?" you get in passing while someone's already looking at their phone. I mean, the kind of question that waits for the real answer. The messy one. The one you don't post. When was the last time you were allowed to not be okay without being told to count your blessings? Let's talk about that shit. Let's talk about what it does to a person when everyone keeps applauding your highlight reel while your internal life is unraveling like thread under pressure. This isn't just about burnout. This is about the invisible violence of having to wear happiness like a uniform, especially in America, where productivity is God and silence is sacred as long as you keep paying your bills. There's a certain kind of grief that no one knows how to hold. The grief of feeling disconnected from yourself while your life still looks good to everyone else. That's what we're here for. Because fuck toxic positivity. Fuck the church lady who tells you to just trust God when your heart is breaking. Fuck the coworker who says everything happens for a reason when you're barely holding it together. Fuck the idea that healing has to be pretty or that emotions need to be Instagrammable to be real. This isn't a video to fix you. I'm not here to give you a 5-step plan to feel better. I'm not trying to sell you hope in a mason jar. I just want to sit in the dark with you for a minute. To remind you that not every chapter needs to be redemptive right away. Some pain isn't a lesson. It's just pain. And it deserves to exist. What happens when your life looks stable, but your chest is full of silent panic? What happens when you've built a personality around being the strong one, and now you don't know how to ask for help without shaking? Nobody talks about that. Because vulnerability makes people uncomfortable. Because in this culture, being blessed means you're not allowed to fall apart. But I'm calling bullshit. You can be blessed and bleeding. You can be grateful and grieving. You can look like you have it all together and still feel like you're dying inside. These things don't cancel each other out. They coexist in the real, raw human experience. And pretending otherwise is killing us slowly. If you've ever sat in your car after work and stared at the steering wheel because going home felt like another performance, if you've ever said, "I'm good," while your inside screamed for someone to just see you, If you've ever wondered why success feels hollow and joy tastes like static, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just exhausted from carrying a story that no one gave you space to tell. And maybe, just maybe, you ended up here because you're ready to stop pretending. This is your permission slip to be a fucking human again. To breathe, to unravel, to not be okay without trying to slap a silver lining on it. This is your sign that you don't have to look blessed when what you need is rest, silence, and space to fall the hell apart. No shame, no filters, no hashtags, just truth. And truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, is sacred.
Let's talk about the places where you're expected to be okay, or at least pretend. Let's talk about the conference calls where your boss calls you resilient for not taking a day off after your dad died. Let's talk about the church sermon that told you depression is just a lack of faith, as if Jesus didn't weep, scream, bleed in public. Let's talk about Thanksgiving dinners where your aunt asks why you're still single, but nobody notices how empty your eyes look. Let's talk about your Instagram feed, where healing means bath bombs, sunset walks, and pastel quotes telling you to just focus on the positive. Because here's the thing, we've turned silence into a virtue, and pain into an inconvenience. Toxic positivity doesn't always show up wearing a fake smile and saying, "Good vibes only." Sometimes it's a coworker sending you a productivity article the day after your panic attack. Sometimes it's a family member who says, "Well, at least you're not in a hospital," when you try to open up about your anxiety. Sometimes it's your own damn voice whispering, "You have no right to feel this way. Other people have it worse." Let me tell you something honest. Comparing pain doesn't make anyone feel better. It just makes suffering lonelier. You start to swallow your emotions because there's no room for them. You start to curate your sadness, make it palatable, make it poetic, make it quiet enough that it doesn't ruin the vibe. But you're not meant to be digestible. You're not meant to be easy to look at when you're in pain. Pain is not a brand. It's not a lesson. It's not a teachable moment unless you want it to be. And healing? Healing is not a fucking performance. It's ugly. It's inconsistent. It's waking up one day feeling okay, and the next day wondering if anyone would notice if you just disappeared. But no one talks about that. Instead, we get flooded with empty affirmations. You got this. Just be grateful. Everything happens for a reason. Choose happiness. Let me translate those for you real quick. You got this means don't make us uncomfortable with your weakness. Just be grateful means I don't want to hear about your pain. Everything happens for a reason means shut up and pretend it makes sense. And choose happiness, that one's the worst. It assumes your pain is a choice, that your trauma is a preference, that your body's grief is something you can just reset like an app update. It's gaslighting dressed up in wellness language. And the fucked up part? You start internalizing it. You start policing your own feelings. You start editing your own story. You start hiding parts of yourself just to make other people more comfortable. That's not healing. That's erasure. And America? God, America is the masterclass in it. The land of the hustle, the grind, the fake it till you make it mentality. You're expected to smile through layoffs, divorces, miscarriages, miscarried dreams. As long as your email signature stays upbeat and your social media feed stays filtered, you're doing great. We've built a culture that values your silence more than your survival. We praise people for pushing through shit that should have broken them, and we never ask what it cost. Wow, you're so strong. Yeah? Strong how?
like teeth gritting, chest tightening, ulcer growing strong? We love stories of strength, as long as they don't sound like crying at 2 a.m. or calling out of work because your heart is too heavy to move. Here's a hard truth. Healing sometimes sounds like quitting. Quitting the job that's draining your soul. Quitting the friendship that only calls when it needs something. Quitting the need to be liked, praised, understood by people who only see you as a reflection of what they want you to be. But quitting doesn't look good on Instagram. Quitting scares people because it means you're choosing yourself in a world that profits from your silence. So instead, we fake it. We show up to Zoom meetings with red eyes and call it allergies. We post throwbacks with #grateful when we silently wish someone would text just to say, "Hey, you don't seem okay." And nobody wants their day ruined. That's the contract, right? You keep the mask on and the world keeps functioning. But masks suffocate. And no amount of fake joy can replace real relief. So, here's the uncomfortable truth. The people around you might not be ready for your full self. They might squirm when you say, "I'm not okay." That's not your fault. That's a system malfunction. That's a society that conditioned us to smile at funerals and call it grace. But what they really mean when they say positive vibes only is this: I'm not willing to hold space for your truth if it disrupts mine. And you deserve better than that. You deserve spaces where your silence isn't misunderstood for peace. You deserve people who say, "Tell me the real answer," and mean it. You deserve a life that doesn't require you to be dying quietly just to be loved.
You ever try to laugh with a hole in your chest? Not a physical one. I'm talking about the invisible kind. The kind you get from years of pretending pain doesn't exist. The kind no X-ray can find, but your whole nervous system is screaming about it. That's what it feels like to live in this performance of being fine. To smile while your brain is stuck in survival mode. To show up looking radiant while your insides feel like they've been dragged through a battlefield and left for dead. You can't meditate that shit away. You can't gratitude journal your way out of trauma. And smiling sure as hell doesn't heal bullet wounds. But we try, because that's what we were taught, especially in this country, especially in America. We were raised in systems that reward performance over truth. Schools that give you stickers for being well-behaved while you silently dissociate at your desk. Jobs that promote you for handling stress well, when really you've just mastered the art of emotional suppression. Families that only celebrate the version of you that doesn't cry too loud, doesn't ask too many questions, doesn't need too much. And it fucks you up. Because eventually you can't tell the difference between being okay and looking okay. Let's talk about that gap, the one between perception and reality. That's where the trauma lives. Let me give you a real story. A woman in Houston. Let's call her Danny. She's the type who brings casseroles to grieving neighbors, who stays late at work, who never forgets a birthday. On Instagram, she's sunshine. Yoga, meal prep, latte art, filtered sunsets. What no one sees is that she hasn't had a full night of sleep in 7 months, that her husband died by suicide last year and she still blames herself, that she's terrified of being a burden, so she smiles harder, posts more, says, "I'm blessed," like it's a magic spell to keep the grief from swallowing her whole. No one sees that she almost didn't make it through last Tuesday. But the likes, the comments, your strength is inspiring. You're such a light. God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. Fuck that. She doesn't need to be a soldier.
She needs someone to tell her it's okay to fall apart. Because smiling through trauma doesn't heal it, it buries it. And what we bury doesn't disappear, it festers. Here's the truth no one prints on t-shirts. Chronic emotional suppression rewires your brain. Literally. Studies from the University of Wisconsin and Harvard Medical School show that people who consistently mask their emotions are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression, memory loss, even physical illness, autoimmune disorders, high blood pressure, migraines that come out of nowhere. You know what that means? Pretending to be okay can actually make you sick. You ever wonder why your stomach's always tight? Why your chest feels heavy even on good days? Why you flinch at kindness or struggle to feel anything at all? It's because your body has become a storage unit for unspoken grief. Because every time someone told you you're strong, when you needed help, your nervous system absorbed the lie, your pain doesn't matter. And over time, that lie becomes a belief. A quiet, corrosive belief that says, if I break, no one will stay. If I'm honest, I'll lose everything. If I stop pretending, they'll finally see how empty I really am. But here's the paradox. The more we fake it, the more we become isolated. Because connection, real connection, requires vulnerability. And performance kills that. You can't be fully loved if you're only partially seen. Let me say that again. You can't be fully loved if you're only partially seen. So what's the cost of keeping up appearances? For some, it's insomnia. For others, it's addiction to alcohol, to work, to validation, to anything that makes the silence inside just a little less loud. And for too many, the cost is their life. We never talk about the people who looked blessed until the moment they were gone. The ones whose Facebook pages are filled with smiling photos, motivational quotes, and family vacations, right up until the obituary. And then we say, I had no idea they were struggling. Of course you didn't. They were fucking excellent at pretending. That's the trauma. That's the unspoken wound. Not just the original pain, but the lifelong performance of pretending it didn't exist. The lie we had to tell ourselves over and over. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. Until we believed it more than our own body. So if no one has told you this yet, hear it now. You don't have to smile today. You don't have to make it make sense. You don't have to look blessed to be worthy of breath, space, compassion, rest. You're not lazy. You're not dramatic. You're not too much. You're carrying wounds that no one could see because they were too distracted by your mask. But you're here, and the mask is heavy as hell. So maybe just for today, set it down. Let the bullet wound breathe. Even if no one else can see it, you know it's there. And that truth deserves more than silence.
Let's take a breath. Because if you made it this far, I know your heart's carrying more weight than anyone gives you credit for. You're not here because everything's fine. You're here because something in you is tired of pretending, tired of holding in all the things no one ever stayed long enough to hear. So let's talk about that. The grief no one warned you about. Not just grief for people, but for versions of yourself that never got to exist. The kid who didn't get to feel safe. The teenager who swallowed every panic attack so she wouldn't ruin the room. The adult who had to keep smiling while everything fell apart in silence. You're not broken. You're grieving something the world never acknowledged. You're grieving the freedom to be seen as fragile without being judged. You're grieving the life you thought you'd have by now, the peace you were promised if you just worked hard, stayed positive, kept it together. But here you are, not at rock bottom necessarily, just floating in the middle of a life that feels misaligned with your actual soul. That dissonance, that constant sense of, why doesn't this feel right even though I did everything I was supposed to? That's grief. And it's real. It's grief for the energy you gave to people who only loved your usefulness. Grief for the years you spent being the strong one, because falling apart wasn't an option. Grief for the self you silenced just to survive. Nobody talks about that kind of loss. There's no funeral for the identity you buried under politeness. No eulogy for the dream you stopped chasing because life got too loud. No moment of silence for the way you learned to shrink just to be acceptable. But your body remembers. Every tight jaw. Every sleepless night. Every time you wanted to say, I'm not okay, but didn't. Grief is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, daily, invisible, chronic. Sometimes it shows up as apathy. You stop caring about things you used to love. Sometimes it's anger, irrational, misplaced, explosive. Sometimes it's numbness, the scariest of all, because nothing hurts, but nothing feels good either. And still, you keep going. That's what makes you strong, by the way. Not the smile, not the pretending, but the fact that you feel all of this and still show up for your life. So let me say it plainly. You're not a failure because you need rest. You're not a mess because your heart is loud. You're not weak because you're tired of being everything to everyone. You are a living, breathing human with limits, with trauma, with needs, with a soul that was never meant to run like a machine. If you've been wondering, what the hell is wrong with me lately? Let me offer a different question. What happened to you that no one helped you carry? Because burnout, depression, anxiety, they're not signs of weakness. They're alarms. Signals that you've been holding too much, too long, with too little support. And the world isn't built to catch you when you collapse quietly. But you don't have to collapse to deserve care. You don't have to explain your pain in a way that makes others comfortable. You just have to be honest, even if the only one listening is you. So let's be honest right now. What are you grieving that you never got to name? Is it the version of you that used to believe in love without fear? The career you sacrificed for security? The years lost to survival mode? The softness you had before life hardened you? That grief is valid, even if no one claps for it. Even if there's no clean narrative to post. And maybe the most radical thing you can do in a world obsessed with fixing and performing and polishing is to say, I don't need to be fixed. I need to be felt. You don't need a glow up. You need room to unravel. You don't need more discipline. You need more space. You don't need to be told it gets better. You need someone to say, even if it doesn't, I'll sit here with you. And if no one said that to you yet, I'll say it now. I see you. Not the curated version, not the polished one. You. The one who's grieving without permission. The one who shows up anyway. The one who's still here, even when nothing makes sense. That's not weakness. That's power in its rawest, most sacred form. Not because it's pretty, but because it's real.
Let's talk about softness. Not the Instagram version. Not the candlelit baths, filtered sunsets, or manicured vulnerability. I mean real softness. The kind that makes you cry when you see an old man eating alone. The kind that notices when your friend's smile doesn't reach their eyes. The kind that breaks your heart wide open when no one's watching. You know, the part of you this world tried to beat the hell out of.
because somewhere along the line, softness became shameful, especially if you grew up in certain kinds of households. If you cried, they called you dramatic. If you hesitated, you were too sensitive. If you asked for help, you were needy. If you showed fear, they told you to man up. So, you toughened up. You learned to laugh off the ache. You swallowed your feelings like pills, hoping they'd go away quietly. You performed invincibility. And the world rewarded you for it. It called you strong. It called you resilient. It called you high functioning. But never once did it ask what that strength was costing you. That's the lie, isn't it? That if you just power through the pain, you're noble. That if you smile while bleeding, you're brave. That if you don't complain, you're the kind of person people can count on. But here's the truth nobody taught us. Your softness is not a liability. It's not a weakness. It's not something to grow out of. It's where your humanity lives. Softness is what keeps you from becoming numb. It's what lets you connect. It's what makes you a person, not a machine. And if the world can't handle that, that's on the fucking world, not you. You were never meant to be stone. You were never meant to absorb pain without releasing it. You were never meant to carry everyone and collapse quietly in the dark. That wasn't the agreement. But I get it. You stayed soft once, and it got you hurt. You let someone in, and they used it against you. You opened up, and they called it too much. So you built walls. You got efficient. You became the one everyone leans on, because it was safer than being the one who needed anything. But here's what they don't tell you about survival mode. It keeps you alive, but it doesn't let you live. There's a cost to always being the strong one. You don't get held. You don't get asked how you are. You don't get the luxury of unraveling because everyone's leaning on your stability. And when you finally crack, people act surprised. They say, "But you were always so put together." No, you were always performing being put together. That's not the same fucking thing. So, let's do something different. Let's give that part of you, the one you buried to keep people comfortable, a chance to breathe. The version of you that cries at commercials. The one who writes poems at midnight. The one who feels everything way too much and apologizes for it even more. That version isn't broken, it's alive. It's the part of you that never stopped hoping, even after the world disappointed you over and over again. You want to know what real bravery is? It's not pushing through the pain. It's letting yourself feel it. It's showing up soft in a world that rewards numbness. It's choosing truth over perfection. It's saying, "I'm tired," when they expect you to say, "I'm fine." Because here's the most radical thing you can do in this world. Feel. Feel the grief. Feel the joy when it comes. Feel the fucking mess in between. You don't need to bounce back. You don't need to get over it fast. You don't need to be easy to love in order to deserve being loved. Let that sink in for a second. You don't need to be easy to love in order to deserve being loved. Your softness is not a fucking sin. It's the most honest part of you. The part this world needs, even though it pretends it doesn't. Because this world is starving for realness, for people who feel deeply and speak truth and sit in discomfort without needing to fix it. And maybe, just maybe, you're here not because you're failing, but because you're finally done performing. Maybe your breakdown isn't weakness. Maybe it's the beginning of your real life. The part where you stop clinching, stop apologizing, stop living for the comfort of people who never learned how to hold your truth. This is not a redemption arc. This is a reclamation of your voice, of your softness, of your right to fall apart and still be worthy.
Let's stop pretending that love is unconditional when most people only love you when you're easy to swallow, when your voice is soft, when your pain is neat, when your struggles don't make them uncomfortable. But the second you show them the mess, the raw, aching, bleeding part of you that can't pretend anymore, they pull away. Or worse, they stay, but only if you stay quiet. That's not love. That's management. That's containment. That's conditional approval dressed up as concern. If someone only supports you when you're convenient, when you're inspirational, when you're pushing through, when you're digestible, they don't love you. They love the version of you that doesn't threaten their comfort. And that's not love. That's performance reinforcement. Real love doesn't require your silence. It doesn't need you to shrink to fit. It doesn't treat your sadness like a stain that needs to be scrubbed out of your personality. Real love stays when the room is heavy, when your eyes are red, when your voice shakes and the only thing you can say is, "I don't know how to do this anymore." Real love says, "Okay, then don't. Just be here. I'll stay." But we've been taught to settle for less. We've been taught to hold our trauma in, not because we're brave, but because we're scared that if we show it, we'll be left behind. So we shapeshift, we dilute, we make ourselves smaller, quieter, easier. We build friendships around sarcasm instead of vulnerability. We enter relationships where our needs are treated like problems. We stay in families that only talk about the weather because no one ever taught us how to say, "I'm not okay," without being dismissed. And every time you silence your truth to keep someone close, you lose a piece of yourself. That's the real heartbreak no one talks about. Not losing other people, but losing yourself by trying to be whatever they needed you to be. So let me say this loud for the version of you who's still hiding. If their love requires your silence, it's not love. If your voice ruins the mood, scream. If your truth makes them uncomfortable, say it twice. If your presence feels like too much, then let them find less. Because you are not too much. They were just never ready for someone real. And I get it. That kind of honesty is terrifying. Because speaking your truth might mean losing people. It might mean sitting in the quiet after someone leaves. It might mean being misunderstood by the people you thought knew you best. It might mean walking away from spaces you've outgrown, even if they still want you there, just not fully you. But what's the alternative? Living the rest of your life as a watered-down version of yourself? Smiling through the ache just to keep the peace? Peace without truth is just control. And love without room for your truth is just performance. You don't need more people around you. You need real ones. The kind you don't flinch when you unravel. The kind who don't call your softness weakness. The kind who say, "You don't have to be okay for me to stay." That kind of love, it exists. But you won't find it while pretending. You won't find it in places where silence is rewarded and honesty is punished. You won't find it while apologizing for needing anything. So maybe the point isn't to be understood by everyone. Maybe the point is to stop betraying yourself to be understood at all. Let them misunderstand. Let them call you traumatic, sensitive, too emotional. Let them walk. Because the right ones, the real ones, they'll know. They'll see your tired eyes and won't look away. They'll hear your cracked voice and lean in closer. They'll stay when all you can offer is your truth, raw and shaking and still beating. That's love. Not perfection, not performance, not silence, but presence in all its messy, terrifying, sacred reality. So if you're watching this right now and wondering if anyone would still love you if you stop pretending, this is your answer. Yes, but only the right ones. And you deserve nothing less. You were not put on this planet to be palatable. You were not born just to perform peace. You were made to feel, to break, to rebuild. to live out loud. And if someone walks because of that, let them. Because if they only loved the mask, they never loved you. If you know someone who's always doing fine, who never complains, who smiles just a little too hard in every photo, send them this. Because maybe what they need isn't advice. Maybe what they need is the freedom to finally fall apart and still be loved when they do.